and to thank you for joining us for this topic of the month, for the month of June 2020, where we're going to talk a little bit about aftermarket safety equipment. And this is a national program, but that we here in the New England FAASTeam have added to considerably, and I think you will enjoy it. Should be about 70 minutes total. If you don't know who we are, this is a quick little review of the New England FAASTeam. Is John Wood from Portland, Maine, FAASTO. You want to say hello, John, and I will get out the highlighter to show who you are.
Sure. Well, we both have smiles on our face
Yes.
there, Steve, because
Yep.
we're out flying. So
Yep.
that was a good deal. But yes, hi everybody. I'm glad to have you with us tonight.
Yeah, and I'm Stephen K. Brown. I'm from the Boston FAASTO, New England FAASTeam program manager, like John, an operations person. Not able to be with us tonight because he is doing adult type things out there right now is Dan Carter from the Bradley FAASTO, who does operations, but Rob Leonard is with us. He's the Airworthiness FAASTeam program manager from the Bradley FAASTO. You want to say hello, Rob?
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here. As you can see, I'm smiling also like John and Stephen, as I'm at the New England Air Museum there, having a grand old time looking at all those old aircraft. But great to be here tonight. Looking forward to sharing this presentation.
Yeah, excellent, excellent.
Yes,
You're
great,
smiling.
great. A lot of
You're
good
not the
information.
one that polished that aircraft. That's what it is.
Oh, that's right.
Terrific, terrific. All right. Couple little quick housekeeping items. Everybody does ask, but this is available for Wings credit. It will be uploaded in a few days. It really depends upon how busy my schedule is the next few days. Many of our webinars, including this one, is the plan we put up on the Boston FAASTeam YouTube channel. Depending upon how good the recording came out and how much editing is done, I can get it up in about a week. If it requires no editing, might be a little bit more. Also, some of our previous webinars, and we're looking to do this more over the summer now that we're all kind of doing that social distancing, working from home as much as we can type of thing, is we are making many of our webinars into courses on FAASAFETY.GOV. That's a couple that we've already done. And do look in the handouts tab, as I had mentioned earlier. We do have 5 different handouts tonight. And I do just want to mention, this is the most recent ones that we've posted up, is you can look at some of the great webinars we've done in the past. On the Boston FAASTeam YouTube channel, you can subscribe so you find out when this one comes out. We did the helicopter safety recently. We did the tail wheeling. Rob, you and I did the safety wire, lock nuts, and nutty pilots recently. You know, all of these are terrific webinars, I think. Now, what we're going to talk about tonight with this aftermarket safety equipment, a little bit about your type of flying, the risk and utility that you have with your flying, and how you can, you know, keep or reduce your level of risk, i.e. safety, and hopefully either keep or improve the utility of your aircraft. We'll talk about some quick and easy safety items that, you know, for you and your aircraft. We're going to talk a bit about seatbelts, emergency drills, flight helmets, believe it or not, baggage areas, flight data, enhanced synthetic vision, angle of attack indicators, and even a little bit associated with the certification of equipment that you may be deciding to add to your aircraft. So we do have a big topic for us to cover tonight. But the first thing is actually a poll question, and this is kind of interesting. It's going to lead us into the first subject of discussion, but it's also a good curiosity factor for me, an aircraft owner, and I'm also suspect that you will find it interesting as an aircraft owner. So I'm launching this poll here. If you would, we do ask is to vote, is I have an allocated budget for, and we're kind of curious to see. We have about 130 people right now that are here online. We're just passing about 20% of you have voted, and we're getting a very good mix of this. Do remember you might need to minimize your screen from the full-size screen in order to vote if you are hitting that issue a little bit. And there is no right or wrong answer to this one. This is, I think, more just to see where you fit in the realm of things with your fellow pilots and aircraft owners, and also to give you a little bit of an idea of maybe some things you should think about. I'm going to go ahead and close that because we're up to about 90%, and I'm going to share that poll. And I'm going to ask either Rob or John to give me a hand with it because I have such a small screen, I can't see it.
Yeah, I'll be happy to, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, I have, and obviously some people voted for more than one thing because the numbers add up to well more than 100%. Okay, I have an allocated budget for upgrades to my aircraft, 36% of you. For annual pilot proficiency training, 34% of you. For upgrades to pilot equipment and supplies, 27% of you. I spend as little as possible, 12% of you, and I am able to spend what I need when I need to, 49%. And of that 49%, do any of them want to adopt a kind of a middle-aged FAASTeam program manager? Because I'm up for adoption. I just want people to know that.
Had not thought of that. Maybe we need to add one more, but it is. I purposely put that question out there because this is something that can provide a little bit of a challenge, and I'm happy to see that many people are taking a look at it and, you know, are budgeting these different things because it really, really will help. You know, if you're a pilot and you have to talk to your husband about what you're spending the money on your Cirrus on, you know, you want to make sure that you have a happy relationship in that. And that's where it's important. You probably want to take a look at an aircraft equipment wish list. When I bought my aircraft a few years ago, I did this. I still have it. I continually modify it. But you probably want to sort or rate the items on that a couple different ways. And this is one of the things that can help you understand what is most important to you. You know, for some people, it may be the cost. If, you know, you can only afford certain things at certain times. If you have your wish list of things for you as a pilot for your aircraft rated out, sorted by cost, or approximate cost, you can start to understand that and say, you know what, I really want XYZ, but I can only afford ABC this year. You know, I want that glass panel, but right now is the time to, you know, buy the extra iPad or whatever else it may be. You probably also want to rate it by the safety impact. You know, and this is one of the things, if you're in a club or in a partnership, or, you know, family-owned aircraft, that can really have a big, big impact on it. Is if this is going to improve the safety of your aircraft, you may find that your spouse or partner may really, really want that and will be willing to spend the extra money for it now versus just doing things exclusively by cost to it. And then also, you know, all of us, we're all human, desire, need. You know, we all like the neatest, newest, gee whiz type of thing. And, you know, to see where, just rate things by the desire or what you feel the need is in relation to what the cost and the safety impact is. What you probably will find is there'll be a few items that rise to near the top on all three sorts of that desire list or equipment wish list on it. And, you know, that's what you should be focusing in on, targeting towards getting at that point in time. And what we want you to think about as you're doing this, thinking about the type of flying that you're doing and also what you want to get for your aircraft, is think about what the risks are for that piece of equipment and the type of flying that you're going to be doing. If what you want to get, is it going to change the type of flying that you're doing, or are you going to be able to keep flying the same way, maintaining the same level of utility, but is it going to improve the safety for you, your passengers, for your family? And for a lot of us, that's probably the area that we're going to fall into, is improving our safety while maintaining the utility of the aircraft in the same way. But some of the items on that list may actually be the other way, but we still want to maintain it, we might actually be able to utilize or improve the utilization, the utility of our aircraft, but we want to make sure if we're doing that, we're maintaining an equivalent level of safety or even better level of safety. What it is, what I'm getting at here in a simple sense, is we don't want your aircraft to end up like this, being a hangar queen. We want you to get out there and enjoy what you do and also help you do what you do as a pilot, but do it better. And that's what we're talking about on this aftermarket safety equipment and trying to get across in a point here in the beginning as we talk about creating that equipment wish list and rating for it. And you really got to think about what type of flying it is that you do. You know, all of us would love to have an aircraft and do this type of flying. You know, backcountry flying has kind of exploded over the years with it. But the big thing to note is this is not this person, you know, I believe this picture is from Ladies Love Tail Draggers, if I recall correctly. And the RAF, too, this lady is involved with. But this is not, you know, your stock Piper. Is note how this aircraft is modified. You know, you got different landing gear. You got vortex generators. You probably got an extended tail on it. You have the beefed up tail wheel in relation to it. Probably modified propeller in relation. Probably crossbars on the fuselage installed. All of those different things are what improve the utility of this aircraft to be able to go out and do that backcountry flying while maintaining an equivalent level of safety. You know, and what it is if you're going to be doing something, you need to recognize that a typical, you know, off the shop floor Cub is not going to be able to do the same type of things that this aircraft can do. And what I mean is you can or shouldn't be doing the same things with a stock Cub that you could do with a highly modified Cub like this. And you know, when I say can't, what I'm getting at there is usually can't ends up to some bent metal, bent airframe, you know, a bad day, which usually leads to a conversation with the FAA and or your insurance company, which is not good. And when I say shouldn't, what happens is if you try to go out and start utilizing an aircraft and getting utility out of it that it was not designed for, you're going to degrade the safety a little bit and people aren't going to want to fly with you. And as we talk about aftermarket safety equipment, it's not only the aircraft, but also, you know, little things you may not realize, but it's how the pilot is modified. You know, for this person flying backcountry, notice the vest. You know, that's a common thing that you'll see in backcountry flying and places where people are out in the woods a bit more or the wilderness a little bit more so that they're able to have equipment on them and available to them all the time. You know, appropriate clothing for the weather and the conditions. The picture is a little bit small, but you know, this particular picture caught my attention because you could tell the person had on some, you know, tough skin pants. Now, the best thing for you, safety-wise, that can really help in enhancing your safety, and it's for you and other pilots to be involved in organizations and sharing information and using available resources that are out there. If you're not part of either a type club or a flying club or a regional organization, you know, please take the time to join now. If you operate a certain type of general aviation aircraft, you know, the type club for it, this is Eclipse Aircraft Owners meeting out in Branson, Missouri years ago. You're going to learn so much from that. And it's available for all types of aircraft. You know, there's the Cessna 150, 152 group. You know, there's the American Yankee Association, the Grumman Pilots Association, the Cessna 170 pilots, you know, Piper, you name it. You probably can find an organization out there that is focused on a specific type of aircraft. And from that, you can learn a lot about how to improve the utility of your aircraft, and how to improve the safety of your aircraft. Now, one thing that you can easily do that's aftermarket, very few aircraft come with this in hand, is putting in a survival or comfort pack of some sort in your aircraft. Is, survival pack if things don't go well and you end up where you should not be, and with, broken airplanes, off airport and all of that. But also think about it from a comfort level. Is if you have an aircraft that you're just flying to and from paved runways 4,000 feet and greater or something like that, and traveling, it may help you out to improve your safety by just having things that are creature comforts for you and your passengers, whether it be on the trip or more so if you get delayed due to weather or something like that. Is if you have something that can make you and your passengers comfortable when you have that period that we all experience in general aviation of waiting for the weather, or usually weather probably is the best thing to mention there. Where you're waiting on the weather, if you can make your passengers comfortable, if you can get past that, are we there yet? Can we go yet? That get home-itis aspect of it. It's really going to reduce a significant stress level on you as the pilot, and it's going to help you from making that decision on going when you really shouldn't. And I don't know, Rob and John, you guys probably have seen this. I mean, it seems every couple of years we deal with an accident or an incident in each of our districts where we're talked to a pilot where it's like, yeah, I should have waited for the weather, or I was rushing to get home or something like that. That happen often?
Oh, yeah, Steve, that's a classic. I mean, I wouldn't want to even guess at the percentage of accidents where we have that, a pilot say that after the fact.
Yeah, we see it all the time, folks. And that's what I'm getting at, is anything you can do that you can have in your aircraft that doesn't weigh much, that doesn't cost much, that in those situations can reduce the stress on you and your passengers, it's going to improve your safety. It's not what most people think about, but it really, really is going to make a difference. Now, for your passengers, something that very few aircraft end up coming with is the safety briefing cards. You can go ahead and buy them from Cessna. I don't know what they cost, but it can help improve the safety and help your passengers understand what is available in your aircraft and where it is available in your aircraft. And AOPA has a couple different examples. In fact, we even have these in the handouts. And, I like this where you can check off what you have in the aircraft and, put a number or whatever next to it where it is located in the aircraft. That just really will help people if, forbid, you had one of those rough examples. Now, there's not much really to cover in a passenger safety briefing for small general aviation aircraft. Really, for the most part, what you're looking at is just the 91-107. And that talks about the use of the safety belts, that when they must be used, that the pilot in command must assure that the passengers have been briefed on the use of them, so forth and so on. But you might want to take a look, and actually, I got the wrong number here. I just realized that. That's 559, folks. 559, not 91-159. That's a typo on my part, which is appropriate for large turbine aircraft, large multi-engine turbine aircraft that are used for general aviation. And it has a list of many more things that need to be covered in the passenger safety briefing. Very similar to what you see on the airlines, actually, in relation to it. And that is, like I said, on 591, 559, not 159. Other little things that you may not have thought about that your aircraft may not be equipped with, but can be inexpensive little devices that can help you out in the future is a 406 ELT. Is if you're still using a 121.5 megahertz ELT, this is personal opinion here, but you're carrying around extra weight for no reason. The likelihood that it will be useful to you and anybody if you were to get in an accident in today's environment is very, very small. Whereas a 406 ELT, will transmit your GPS position and is much, much more accurate. If you know anybody in the CAP, ask them about the difference in being able to locate a downed aircraft that only has a 121.5 ELT versus the 406 ELT. There's a huge, huge difference with it. And one thing that people use, whether it's in conjunction with the ELTs or an aircraft that don't require them as a replacement for them or whatever, you might want to consider, a satellite tracker that you can use in your aircraft. And also what's great about these is many of them allow at least some level of communication with texting function, texting capabilities. And if you're going to be flying in areas that are a little bit further out of the way, over wilderness areas or whatever, it will make a big, big difference in you being found if you do not return. And I give an example. This is one of the things that I use, and this is just an example of a flight across Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And you can see if you're familiar with Umbagog Lake and Berlin, New Hampshire, and Island Pond, Vermont, and Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, that area, you'll know that there's a lot of trees out there and very, very few people. A satellite tracker can help keep you, your friends, and anybody that can help you out in touch with what is going on. Now, for those of us that have been flying for a while, the best safety equipment that we thought we could ever get was, a color attitude indicator, and the bigger attitude indicator that we could get, the better. But really things have changed a little bit over time. Is today with changes in the aircraft certification programs in the last couple of years, we now have easy glass panel. I use Dynon here as an example because I use them a lot in the experimental world, and I was so happy when they got approved for small general aviation aircraft in very, very widespread use. And now, if you want to have all the functionality and information available to you from a glass panel, it's so much easier to get it now than it was even 5, 6, 10 years ago. It really is, comparatively, it may be inexpensive. And that's one of the things, if you wanted a glass panel 3 or 4 years ago in your older 172 or Cherokee, it was a lot of money. Still a fair amount of money, but now you have the capabilities at, 35, 50% of the price of what it was 5, 6 years ago. Now, here's a little interesting statistic. All of us are shoppers out there, and if we put out a sign or something, save 60%, we'd probably all be over it if we were buying it. But here's just a few things that we've found within safety accident investigation that really, really can make a difference. Is we took a look at accidents in Alaska, and we found that just these few pieces of equipment, could really make a difference and reduce the general aviation fatalities that we saw in Alaska by 60%. Is having 4 or 5-point harnesses, seatbelts, that protected shoulder and head, also kept you from submarining. For the operations in rough terrain, aircraft helmets, and airbags, which we all pretty much have all over our cars. You know, you drive a Volvo or Subaru or something like that, which are predominant cars here in northern New England, is, I don't know, they got 20, 30 airbags in them. How many airbags are in, you know, a Volvo? A lot with it. And, you know, you really do want to think about multi-point restraint systems. Is the first big thing with it is if you're flying an older aircraft like this older Cessna 140 with it. A lot of aircraft were certified many years ago with just the single lap belt that went across. But adding shoulder belts will really do a lot to protect you. The, you know, the portion of your body that you can do a lot of damage to very, very quickly without much force is your head, shoulder area with it. And that's just not protected without shoulder harnesses. I give you a little bit of a story with this. Aviation safety inspector I used to work with, he went out and bought a Cessna 140, beautiful little Cessna 140 to just fly around in. And I remember he had an IA that he took to do a pre-purchase on it and everything. And he looked at the aircraft and, you know, the feedback to him was, this is a terrific Cessna 140. You want to buy it. Okay. And so he did. But there was a big but with it. He says, but I'm not going to let you fly it until you put shoulder harnesses in it. That's the one thing that you really, really need. And we just dealt with it a little bit. Sad situation. I'm familiar with it because of the glider community, and John might be familiar with it because it was an accident in his district. But we had a triple fatality in a Schweitzer 232 glider up in the Stowe, Vermont area a year or two ago. And the final report recently came out on this, which I was aware, but that aircraft, although it by the type certificate data sheet required lap belts and shoulder harnesses, what was installed in it was lap belts only. And actually, because there was so much force on the lap belts that the lap belts broke in the crash scene. And the even sadder part to this is the operator had already ordered and had received new lap belts and shoulder harnesses to put in that aircraft, but had just not installed them yet. They were actually sitting in the box in the office when the accident did happen. You know, another factor with belts, I talk about the shoulder harnesses a lot, but it's also a very good thing to have a 5-point harness where, you know, it's down between your leg strap. But what that keeps you from doing is what's known as submarining, kind of sliding out the bottom of your seat in the rapid deceleration that can occur. That's another safety factor that we found. You know, you hear about this in the race car industry and others. It's also interesting to think about, which we'll talk about here a little bit, is when you get into the 4-point harnesses and 5-point harnesses, is the different buckle system that is on it. And that might be a big improvement to you that you don't even realize. We're familiar with the airbag seat belts. Those help quite a bit. And what is great, the AmSafe ones, I had taken a look at this a few years ago for an aircraft that I fly, but have the airbag seatbelts, and they're approved basically for all small general aviation aircraft. This is one of those things where the FAA recognized it and approved the STC that it basically was for all aircraft, you know, small GA aircraft. So it doesn't really matter what type you have, you should be able to put them in with the STC from what I recall on the AmSafe airbags. You know, we're talking about the buckles on these a little bit, and here's something to think about. You know, and we highly regulate the airlines all the time, but do you know which way, you know, the airline seat belts unbuckle? Is it left to right or right to left? You know, think about that for a minute. Think of every time you've been on an airline. Is it always the same? If it is it always on one side versus the other? Maybe does it go by air carrier? You know what? This is one of those things. There's no standard. We don't have a standard for the airlines even on this right now. So do you think we have a standard for our small GA aircraft? And you know what? It is important to know how that equipment works, because you might have to exit the aircraft quickly in a high stress event, something like this. And also, this is one of the other things, is you might have to do it in the dark. And this leads to the question, you don't realize how important seatbelts and airbags and stuff like that can be until you have something as simple as this. A little accident like this, where it just flips over, can be the difference of walking away from it and going, oh, shoot, this is going to cost me. And you dial up your insurance agent to. We've actually had accidents that don't look even this bad, where we've had fatalities before, which is not very good. And that's what it's going to do. It's going to help you in those circumstances. So do think about it for your seatbelts. And if you're flying the Cessnas or the Pipers, here's some of the little traps to start thinking about there too, with your seatbelts, is where is the buckle placement? How many Cessnas have you gotten into that the buckle is right down by the door? Like you literally have to have the door open, in order to undo or clasp the seatbelt, or vice versa, where it's right up between two tight seats and right down in the middle of the seats. And maybe like on this one, you'll see is both belt buckles side by side. So even if you don't decide to replace or upgrade seatbelts on your aircraft, or have that as something on your wish list, you do want to make sure that you are familiar with how to get out of your aircraft. And you might want to try a little tracking exercise like this. Most people are very comfortable whether they're right side up or upside down to find the sternum, the center of their chest, which you can find by just grabbing the belt on it, the shoulder harness. And then from there, you can follow down to your lap, grab the bottom of the seat with it to find out where you are and get yourself located, and do the same thing in order to find where your belt buckle is and also where the door lever is. And you may want to try that, the classic old blindfold test that we end up doing. And we actually have that, believe it or not, if under like the 135 regulations, where we have emergency drills for using equipment and practicing that sort of thing. And here's a couple pictures of accidents that we've dealt with that you look at and you think, oh, they're horrific. But believe it or not, these are accidents where the pilots have said they had a harder time getting out of the aircraft after the accident than the accident itself and when it happened. And John, you and I have worked together. Back when I was in industry, we used to do this at a collegiate program that I used to operate in the summertime. We had a few different types of aircraft, and we would do emergency drills and extrication exercises on a day in the summer, give out little note cards with it and say, here you are with this type of student, and this happened and the student is injured this way. What are you going to do? It's kind of like remembering the fire drills you used to do back in school.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can't tell you how many 135 companies I sat through their emergency drill training with them, and it's so highly effective and so important to get that muscle memory down and to actually do it, in a practice situation, so that when you have to do it in real life, you know what to do.
Yeah. And, you don't have to be a 135 operator to do this. You can do some tracking exercises, some of that blind cockpit stuff on your own. But boy, if you're in a flying club or a partnership, that may be a good thing to do once a year or once every 2 years, even an FBO that does it. And I can remember the question came up. We had a few eclectic aircraft, but the point really, really came across to us once. We were lucky enough, and we made the decision that we were willing to even spend some maintenance money on it. It was our slow time of year. So like the Piper Seminoles, which the pilot window can get pulled out. We had somebody actually do that to see what it was like. It was the first time any of the instructors had seen how that emergency exit ever worked. I will admit, the A&P that put it back together, I think, cursed me over it because it was the first time he ever put one back in also. And he learned a few things himself about it, but it was so interesting. And, you know, some of the things you learn, we had pilots, instructors that were qualified and had forgotten that there was a separate emergency exit on that aircraft. You know, all sorts of little things you end up learning when you do emergency drill practices like that. Here's something that's interesting, and you know, this is, you know, local pilot does good. Fairly famous pilot now, Rob Holland from the air shows. You know, and this is from his Facebook post talking about flight helmets. But here's the question that always comes up: when do you think they're needed? Nowadays, you see most airshow pilots probably wearing them, but for someone that does aerobatics regularly, are they wearing them? Are they not? EMS or helicopter air ambulance operations, do you see them wearing it? Are they? Are they not? Just regular helicopter operations. I do know one helicopter flight school recently that went and changed that they require helmets of their instructors. I don't know what they're doing about the students. I need to find out. Agricultural operations, believe it or not, that's kind of the one and only place that we, the FAA, require it. Now I say kind of require it because it is not written technically into the regulations, but in our approval programs for agricultural aircraft operations, we do expect them to be using helmets. A lot of discussion and debate is coming up about backcountry flying. I'm involved with this and I talk about this, and I actually think it is a good idea, but for glider and banner tow pilots, you know, every year we tend to have an accident or two with those people. And what's even interesting is ultralight pilots, who you may think, you know, from a broad spectrum, may not take safety to heart as much as most general aviation pilots, but do go ahead and take a look at people flying ultralights, and you'll find many of them are out there flying with helmets. And even another interesting point, this is a discussion point I had years ago with actually former board member of the NTSB, but personal opinion that person had was that any 135 single pilot operation, he thought that they should wear helmets. The reason why is you're down to just one point. Is too much turbulence hitting your head or something like that bad in a 135 single pilot operation could be detrimental to the passengers. And if you were to ever have, you know, an accident with a 135 operation, as we have had in Alaska more so than other parts of the country, but who's the first person to arrive on the scene? You know, the pilot. And they're the ones that are supposed to be taking care of all the passengers if an emergency or accident were to occur. So, you know, that person's opinion. And I did a lot of 135 single pilot flying and did it in some rough weather. And, you know, I tend to agree with a person. I think that would be a good thing to improve the safety. Another thing safety-wise to think about that you may want to do aftermarket-wise is think about your baggage. We're up here in ski country. It's or where John and I live, and Rob's been there too, and Dan also. But in the middle of the winter, we get a lot of people using their GA aircraft to fly to and from places. Like you and I met at the Bethel Airport in Maine recently, John, right next to Sunday River ski area. But people fly in to and out of airports like that with the family loaded up with their skis flopping around inside the aircraft. Now, all it takes, and it has happened, is for it to get caught in something, to bounce around, be loose, sharp edge, catch somebody, give them a bad cut, whatever it may end up being. And that's something to think about on your baggage, is if you're going to carry outside items, you may really want to consider going for a baggage modification, an STC for the ski tubes or fishing rod tubes that are available out there. Or like this one is for the Bonanza A36s, where the baggage area usually stops right there behind the back seats, but there's an STC to get it extended further out. And even more important, I think, is having a good way to secure the baggage, is having that. And knowing what you're carrying for baggage and having it properly secured. This is the results. Pilot was perfectly fine in this example, but this was the result of unsecured baggage, carrying something in a good load hauling aircraft, a Cessna 182, but carrying something that didn't fit in the baggage compartment and not having it properly secured, is it ultimately mixed with other baggage when landing on the rough terrain, and they ended up having a fire that they lost the aircraft to. Yeah. Some other things.
Steve.
Oh yeah.
Steve, I just wanted to say on that. I mean, it's such a valid point. I mean, restraining the baggage, because a lot of times pilots will just throw things behind the seat because that's a baggage compartment, and not think too much about restraint. But I'll tell you, the amount of kinetic energy in even a very small object that's you may have the 5-point shoulder harness and seatbelt combination. You might have the airbag, the AMSafe airbag, and it could be that mag light that you had sitting on top of the baggage that comes forward and cracks you in the back of the skull as the aircraft decelerates in an accident. So it really is so important to make sure that baggage is restrained.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting is now, as aircraft have gotten older, how many Cessna 172s or 150s are out there that no longer have their cargo net available. It disappeared in somebody's closet years ago, and it's no longer available out there. That's the type of thing you need to look at and think about getting replaced. And this is the little trick question from DPEs and aviation safety inspectors. I still don't understand it. I've never gotten an answer to it, although I know it has existed now for 25 plus years. As believe it or not, the cargo net in the Cessna 172 RGs is listed as required equipment, that it must be on the aircraft and installed. It's required equipment on the aircraft. It's amazing to me. That kind of leads us in a few things as we're talking about, is not everybody has always given thought to parachutes. Some of you that know what I do for flying operate in the glider world, which they're fairly common here in the US. Believe it or not, other countries have regulatory requirements for it. But typically here in the US, the only ones that you see in gliders wearing parachutes are people that are doing longer cross-country flights in their own aircraft, or are doing competition. And part of the reason for that is because of, added risk of potential for mid-air collision in the competitions. But we've also seen examples both in gliders and in airplanes where having them really has made the difference. We had this same type of, or near similar type of aircraft out in Utah break up in flight at high altitude, about 17,000 feet, with an Air Force cadet along as a passenger, where they ended up bailing out. They weren't required to be wearing parachutes or anything like that, but they were, and they both were able to bail out and, survived, actually pretty much able to walk away from the accident in relation to it. We had one here a few years ago, you may recall, John, where we had a glider pilot parachute out because although they had not hit terrain, They had found themselves in IMC conditions below the summit of the mountains in a mountain valley and knew it was just a matter of time and figured
Yeah.
it was safer there.
And that's not a good place to be in a powered plane and in a glider. Boy, your options are really going away quickly. So
Yeah.
at least they had the sense to have the chute, so they had that option available. I mean, it's probably saved their lives.
Yeah.
Their life.
Yeah. And we've had others. I know near where I grew up is Windsock Village. What, 10 years ago now, we had someone was doing aerobatics, but had a problem with the aircraft and parachuted away safely. You know, and that's where I'm talking about the utility versus the safety. You know, if you're making that step up in utility, like doing aerobatics, is what are you doing to maintain an equivalent level of safety? And that's where, for example, parachutes come into play. And I bring it up, it's interesting also is there's a flight school that I know that operates a super decathlon, fairly new one. And I've flown the aircraft a few times myself. And one of the first times I flew it, basically getting a checkout with the DPE there, is I look around and noticed, and, you know, you guys don't have a fire extinguisher in here. And he kind of looked at me and said, yeah, that's true. But we also do require that you wear the parachute at all times when flying this aircraft. We don't let anybody take it without wearing parachutes. Is even if they're not doing aerobatics, they're required to wear parachutes. That's our policy. And I said, why? He says, because we don't have the fire extinguisher for that reason, is we don't want people to be firefighters and, you know, try to put out a fire in this fabric covered aircraft. If you have an onboard fire in this fabric covered aircraft, you're bailing out. You know, if you can't get it on the ground in like 10, 15 seconds, your best option is to bail out of the aircraft. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. But what's awesome out there now, and we finally have seen the results of this, you know, most people think about it in terms of the Cirrus, but if you're involved in the light sport aircraft world or the ultralight world, you see these everywhere. And I had the opportunity, I didn't even know it was their home base. I just literally happened by the airport as I was out there doing check rides out in Minnesota, and met with this company, Ballistic Recovery Systems. You know, it surprised them that day. Hey, knocked on the door. I'm from the FAA, but from the safety perspective, I was so impressed with what has happened over the years with how many saves it has. And, you know, there's STCs for these on the 172s and 182s that are out there available. May be expensive, but, you know, it's out there. And that's the type of thing. Not only can you have a parachute for yourself, you can have a parachute, you know, for your aircraft. And there's all sorts of things out there to improve the safety of your aircraft. How many of us have had a mag go bad flying? Probably all of us. If you've flown over 100 hours, you've probably had it, or you've done enough flying to get your pilot certificate, you probably have had it. But we know from our automobiles that electronic ignition is absolutely wonderful, and, you know, having fewer mechanical parts. We have systems now like this that are STC'd where, you know, we continue to run on one, we continue to have a mag on one ignition system and then have electronic ignition on the other ignition system. And it does all of these things for us, which is absolutely terrific. And as we are looking at improving safety, you know, some of the best things we have now too is maybe not the old style like we see with this, but, you know, boy, I'm noticing another thing too. I'm sure someone would call me out on this, but this comes from the national portion of it. It should be cockpit voice recorder, not VOS recorder. So I'll mark that for myself too. With it, but we have flight data being available to us. And if you're not familiar with it, you know, so many entities now are working off of the Flight Operations Quality Assurance Program, where this data is being fed back in. And even if you have your own aircraft, if you have a good engine monitoring system, there's some companies out there that will analyze the data of your engine for you and make it so much better. And you have that available. You know, it just might be the engine data that you're looking at, but also There's systems out there that you can get the flight data and the visual data. And speaking of visual, we've seen big improvements in this world, where we're starting to see enhanced vision. It's gotten to be less money to have it available. So if you're flying in the poor weather, that it's available out there for you. And synthetic vision is becoming such an important part. We are able to see this in our glass panels and even see it in something as simple as our iPads, with all of the accelerometers and AHAR units. And we're even seeing it move into things like are being used in the automobile industry, passive millimeter wave sensors, so that we're able to see more than, say, 1,000 feet into the fog, but be able to see 3 miles into the fog and stuff like that. We started approving these under what's known as the NORSEE program years ago, angle of attack indicators, which you used to only see on, military or big jets, but they're available for general aviation aircraft. And it may look a little bit different depending upon what system that you have. But even now, you go buy a brand new Cessna 172 and spend the money for it, you're going to get an angle of attack indicator, which is designed to help you understand where you're flying on that coefficient of lift curve, where you're in normal operations versus when you're getting into stalled conditions with it, and the additional sensors. And, we're seeing things as all of this technology has improved. We're starting to see tomorrow show up in today. We've probably all heard about the auto land with it. Always a big question if you're looking at adding aircraft to help improve your safety is, what does it require? Does it have an STC? Does it not? What is involved with it? Well, if you're flying an experimental aircraft, you'll find that it's probably easiest to make any of these changes or add this special equipment. Almost every single experimental aircraft will not need to have an approval to have additional safety equipment added to it. But you do need to realize it may not be proven. It could possibly put you back into the phase 1 portion of your flight test program and needs to be done there. If you're flying light sports, special light sports specifically, you probably will need manufacturer approval. And depending upon the aircraft, sometimes that may vary to who is even the manufacturer now with it. But most of us are probably familiar with our traditional Cessnas, Grummins, Cherokees, Beechcraft with the standard airworthiness certificates. And typically with those, you'll need a supplemental type certificate. And also, if not, it may be possible to get what's known as field approvals. Those had been getting much harder, but in the last couple of years, as we've changed the aircraft certification standards, Part 23 with it, and changed the process, you've been seeing both supplemental type certificates and field approvals being a bit easier. Not saying easy, but easier in the last 2 or 3 years to be able to get. You may want to take a look at, I believe these are in the handouts, is Advisory Circular 43-210, FAA Order 8300.16. I don't know if that one's in the handouts or not, but that is what an FAA inspector is required to go through in issuing a field approval. And I also put in there, which is a very useful tool, is there is a job aid that is available to the public, but it's specifically for inspectors to look at when they are getting a submittal for a field approval to have some type of equipment added or changed on their aircraft. So with that change in the regulations, then we also have had, which this has been an absolutely terrific program. I am so happy that we went through with this, is what's known as the NORSEE program, or the non-required safety enhancing equipment. This is how the angle of attack indicators first came into being, and how other things are there. Is basically what we have said is for small GA aircraft, we have a way that we can quickly approve things that will enhance safety, but are supplemental to it, that it's not a required type of thing. This is just an example of some of the things that the NORSEE program can cover, like traffic advisory, terrain, attitude indicators, extinguishing system, configuration advisories such as gear down, not down, supplemental indications such as more accurate fuel indications in addition to what the aircraft was originally equipped with. And you can search this, just NORSEE FAA, and take a look at the list of all the different things that have been approved under this program. It just is a great, great program, and I'm so happy to see us move in that direction. Now, the best thing about all that we've been talking about here tonight is, this gives you a little bit of a taste and gives you that opportunity to start to be that kid again and dream about your airplane and what you would have on it. So, I bring this up. This is just to give you some thoughts, and that's all that I'm talking about, is to give you that opportunity to tell you that it's okay to dream a little. Is if you needed to, what would you do? And, I end up towing gliders occasionally, and there is some inherent risk above and beyond typical general aviation flying with it. And I look at the accidents and the incidents that occur, and, we have fatalities, we have broken airplanes, we have bumps and scratches with it, and if I were to kind of start looking at what would I want in the ultimate tow plane and what it would have with it, I would look at something with tricycle gear, but it would have, the oversized fork and tires on it to give it that prop clearance. It would be something like a 182 that has the capabilities to it, but it may also be like this Peterson conversion that has the STOL wing on it that, allows it to fly and land in a much flatter attitude and also have a more effective elevator on it. It might have speed brakes to be able to get down without shock cooling the engine, extended wingtips to have a lower takeoff speed and landing speed, which that just reduces the energy at the points where we end up seeing it. It would have a ballistic recovery system chute, it would have a helmet associated with it. It also would have what's known as a toast release on it. That has just been proven over the years to be a safer way of it. But something that has never been improved yet, although I would like to see it as for the tow pilot, is what's known as a quick release trigger versus, the typical handles that you see down there. And this is just, this is how I think about improving and adding on aftermarket safety equipment. You take your typical 182 and it starts to look a lot different when you start putting equipment on it that will focus you on better utility in one area, but maintain a higher level of safety. And last but not least, one of the greatest things we've had for aftermarket safety that you can go buy and bring into your aircraft at any time, and you can sit at home with as a pilot, is the information you get off of your iPad tablet, using Garmin Pilot, ForeFlight, and all the others. There's just so much to talk about here. The list goes on and on and on. But this is where you should sit down. Think about the type of flying that you do. What can you do to either improve the utility while maintaining the safety, or more so, probably maintain the same level of utility, but improve the safety for you and your passengers? And, always a part to it, I have to be the advocate for this, is pilot proficiency. Being a proficient pilot will help you at so many levels, in your confidence, and in your safety. Good practice, proficiency training works no matter what we do. We've found that to be the case, and take the time to do it. We have the Wings program. It'll help you be a much better pilot. We see so few pilots that have incidents, accidents, or boo-boos, pilot deviations that are involved in the Wings program. So we do encourage it. You get wings credit for tonight on the knowledge side, but we have to advocate for you to get out there and get involved on the pilot side to get a level of wings. Most people are not aware it is something that is occurring in this year. Also, it has occurred in past years, as we have the Wings Industry Advisory Committee, which has a scholarship program for it. And we have given out a few different scholarships with it. You know, last year we had 4 $1,500, 4 $750, and 2 $500 winners for it. After you achieve a level of wings on FAASAFETY.GOV, if you go into the Claim My Rewards for achieving the level of wings, you can get entered into this. And think about it this way. It's a way that you basically can get a scholarship to become a proficient pilot. So we want to thank you, flying regularly with your CFI, perfect practice, and document it in wings. And we want to thank you for joining us tonight. If you do need to get a hold of us, this is our contact information for the New England FAASTeam. Probably the best FAAST team in the country, right, guys?
Hey, I think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there, Steve, for sure.
Yes. Yeah. No, thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to go ahead and take some time now to answer some questions. You don't have to stick with us. It's only by your choice if you want to stay with us for some of the questions. We'll take them for about 10, 15 minutes or so. You will get credit if you leave now. No worries or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and stop